Hi everyone, you're here starting with Cody, and today we're working on this quilt along with our lazy angle ruler, and in this video we are working on block 8. So here is our wonderful block 8. This is probably my favorite block. I just love the way it looks, and it's not as simple as some of the other ones, so it's a little bit more, I'm not going to say challenging, it's just a little bit more involved, and it just makes it a little more fun because it's not as simple. So as you can see here, we have a little 4 patch in all 4 corners, and then just a solid center with large triangles all the way around. So like all the other ones, using the lazy angle ruler makes all these blocks super easy. So let's get started. But before, if you do like this, end up liking this video, please give it a thumbs up. Always leave a comment in the comment section below. And always remember to check out the blog, and it has all the written patterns for each block every week after this video, or each block's video has been uploaded. But those patterns on the blog and the videos on YouTube will always be there for whenever you're ready. All right, let's go take a closer look. All right, so here is block number 7. So let's get started with cutting. So the first thing we're going to do is something I've already done, is we are going to cut a 1.5 inch by 12 inch strip for both the background and for fabric B. So I've mentioned this in both block 6 and block 7 when we created the center little 4 patch, how we just cut individual squares, but you can do it another way if you're making multiple, and that's with using strips. So here, to get the amount of pieces that we need for all 4 corners, we're going to use 2 12-inch strips. So one of the background and one of the fabric B. And we'll just eventually just sew those together and chop them up. So we've got those cut already. So now we're going to cut the center out of fabric B. So first we're going to use our handy dandy 6.5 inch square. So this is going to be a 2.5 inch square. So we're going to line it up with the 2.5 inch markings on our creative grid 6.5 inch square. So we'll line up the top, sides, and bottom. Give that a cut and put this in our pile over here with our fabrics that are already cut. So here, this is our background, but this is actually going to be cut into 8 small trapezoids because they're going here. So again, I'm cutting 2 layers at a time. So now we're going to cut using our creative grid ruler. And so since we're working with the smaller trapezoids, that's going to be this 2.5 inch marking right here. So we're just going to lay the edge of our cut fabric along here and the bottom, and we're just going to give that a cut, and then we can flip the ruler and cut from the back side. So we're going to line up the bottom, and we're going to line up this angled side here, give that a cut, and then we can flip the ruler back and cut just like we did in the beginning. And we're going to need 8 of these. So that makes 6, and this will make 8. All right. So those are our 8 background small trapezoids. So now we need 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the large trapezoids out of fabric A. So to get these, just like we've done previously, we're going to line up with this larger 2.5 inch piece here on our ruler. And so we're going to line up the left hand side and the bottom. Just give it a cut. That gives us 2. So here we can just rotate the ruler, align it up with the 2.5 inch markings here, and then line up with the sides and the bottom and cut. So there we are. So we've got our 4 our 4 main triangles that are going around our square out of our big trapezoid. We've got 8 smaller trapezoids in the background, one 2.5 inch square for the center, and then a 1.5 by 12 background and a 1.5 by 12 fabric bead. So now what we need to do is we're going to lay these together, and we're going to sew these together along one edge. Then we're also going to take these and we're going to attach our small trapezoid background along here, just like this. Remember, have little dog ears, kind of even on each end. And we'll pin all 4 of these together. So now we've got all 4 of these pinned. So those are ready to be sewn. And then we've got this, which is ready to be sewn. And then so we'll go to the sewing machine, sew this together, and we'll go to the ironing board and press these all out. All right, to the machine. So here we are at the sewing machine. So we'll start with our trapezoids. And of course, always remember to have your 1/4 inch foot on with your single needle stitch plate, if you have one. And so we're going to make sure we start in this little corner here, and make sure we ride the edge of our fabric along the right side edge of our 1/4 inch foot. So now we've got those sewn, so now we'll sew together our 12 inch by 1.5 inch strips. So now that we have everything sewn and we chain piece them together, so now we're going to cut them all apart. So now we'll go to the ironing board and we're going to press all these seams. All right, so here we are at the ironing board. So what we'll do, so we have our long 12.5 inch piece. So this we're going to press to one side, and of course it's going to be to our fabric B side, so we don't see that seam underneath there. And make sure that seam is pressed nice and flat to one side, so we don't have any extra little folds. So set that aside. So here we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to press to the dark side, which in this case will be fabric A. So give that a little press. And sometimes it's easier to finger press it first, and that helps you get it nice and flat, because once it's under the iron, it's too close to that heat to mess with. And especially when sometimes one piece is significantly smaller than another, it naturally wants to go one way, and sometimes it's not the way you want it to go. So finger pressing it first can really help, and to make sure you get it nice and flat. All right, so we've got all of our pieces pressed. So now we'll go to the cutting table. We'll chop this up into 1.5 inch pieces, little rectangles. They're 1.5 inch wide, and we'll go and we'll cut another side off of this piece and sew another background piece. All right, let's go take a look and see what we need to do next. All right, so we're back. So let's trim this guy up. So this is super easy. So we're just going to take our 6.5 inch ruler and we're going to cut off 1.5 inch segments. So let's line up with the edge here at the 1.5 and make sure the bottom's lined up. And another thing you can do, so you have this center seam, so you can make sure that you're lined up with one of those markings on the ruler too. So you're covering all your bases to make sure it's staying nice and straight. So we'll cut, we can come here and just keep moving it over. So we're lined up here, we're lined up along the bottom, and we're just cutting. And we're cutting 1.5 inch segments. So there's 3, 4, 5. All right, so there are all those pieces, and we'll come to those in just a minute. So what we're going to do now is, so we have our trapezoids. So what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to essentially sew another one here to get kind of that look. So we know how we need to cut these. So we need to basically cut it like this. However, we don't want to cut having the wrong side of the ruler up. So we want to cut it like this. So if we flip this, then we'll have that same angle. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to take the square and going to flip it to the wrong side's facing up. We're going to take our lazy angle ruler and we're going to line the left side and the bottom side with that 2.5 inch marking here, just like that. And now we're going to cut that side off. And you'll be left with this. So let's go and do that to all of them. So here we've got them. So we got all of our pieces cut. So now what we can do, we can then pin and sew the pieces onto the side just like we do here. It's just like as always, we line up that nice cut edge here. Line it up there, make sure we have the little dog ears, and then we'll pin. So do this for all 4 of these. So now I've got all those pinned. So now what we can do, and we're not going to worry about pinning these, we'll just assemble them all at the sewing machine. So we're essentially going to take 2, one's going to be flipped like that to create a little 4 patch. And as always, we're going to want to interlock those seams just like that and sew a beautiful 1/4 inch down. So we'll take all this to the sewing machine and we'll sew them up, and I'll meet you at the ironing board. All right. Alrighty, so we've got all of our pieces all sewn. So now we need to press them. So let's start with a little 4 patch. So here you can press them either one way or you can press them open. I like to press them open because they just lay flatter. So we'll go and press all these. Alright, so we've got all those pressed, so we'll set those aside. Now here we're going to do these a little differently. So the first section we were able to easily press towards the dark side. So you can do that again here by pressing this under. But what that starts to do is it really starts to add quite a bit of bulk in this section, and this piece doesn't want to lay as nice and as pretty down flat. So here we are going to allow it to be pressed to the light side, and this section here is going to lay so much flatter and so much smoother and give you a much prettier point. So this is one of those cases, like I've mentioned before, that not every instance can we or should we press to the dark side. This is one of those cases. Because when we press it to the light side, in this case, it's this point and everything just lays so much flatter and it's just so much nicer. But if you look, you can see this side does look a little prettier than this side, but it's just the nature of the beast. So one thing that really helps eliminate that show through, especially when you're working with white fabric, is when you go and quilt your items, use bleached or a white batting. And having that white on white, it really helps hide that. Because unlike having, say, a dark fabric behind it, you would have a white fabric behind it. And it's going to be less noticeable. Maybe not with this particular white fabric, but a white batting really helps hide that. So that's a trick when working with a lot of white fabric in your quilt, is that's when I quilt customers' quilts, that's one thing I recommend, is when they have a lot of white background fabric in their quilt, I do recommend a white batting. Because also a colored batting, or basically a batting that has been bleached, it can actually discolor your whites. And it's not necessarily changing the color of your fabric. It's just now you're adding a batting that's colored behind it, so your white fabric isn't going to be as white as it naturally is, but a white batting would. All right, so we're pretty much done. We just need to assemble our quilt. So one thing we're going to do when we go to the cutting table is we're going to trim off all these little dog ears and get them out the way so we have a nice, clean, crisp 2.5 inch square. All right, to the cutting table. All right, so we're at the cutting table. So we've got our 4 corners all nice and cut and ready to go. However, these guys need some prettying up. So we're going to trim all these little dog ears off so it looks nice and pretty, but also it just gives you a prettier quilt block on the back, and it's just less bulk that can be in your way. All right, so here we've got our 4 corners, we've got our center, and so there is a rhyme or reason in the direction which we're placing these 4 patches. So basically as you can see here, we want that green to kind of shoot this way and this way. It gives it a totally different dimension. And so these, we're going to have them go this way. However, just like with some other blocks, so there's our star. With some other blocks, you can definitely change the orientation of some of these smaller blocks without changing anything else. You can get a totally different kind of look. Oh yeah, so I see it now. So you can see our star here, our little rays there. So that's a totally different look that you can get. And all this is the way we rearranged it. But that's not the block we're doing. So here is our block. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew these 3 together, those 3 together, those 3, and we are going to sew those strips together. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine, I'm going to sew all of this, go to the iron, and we'll press all these nice and flat, and I'll show you the direction to press them. It's the same way we've done other blocks. And then we'll sew them together and we'll have our finished block. All right, almost done. So here we are with our pieces all sewn. So now we're going to press them, and we're going to press them just like we pressed all the other ones. So with these, we're going to press out, and these we're going to press in. And that just allows them to interlock nicely. So you can do, kind of fold that back and do a little finger press. Fold that back, do a little finger press. And of course, hit them with the iron. Remember, we're not pushing or stretching anything, we're just using the weight of the iron. And so here we're going to press these in. And sometimes I do find it's easier to flip them over to the back and press, or flip them from the front and press. It really depends on the individual piece. But make sure when you do press them, they are pressed nice and flat. You don't have any little folds. So this is pretty much it. So all we're going to do now is we're going to go to the sewing machine, sew these together, one row at a time. And of course, with all the blocks, like I always mention, is the reason why we press each row going different directions is so when we connect those rows and interlock them, we can have this piece, this row, going the seam press one way, and the second row, the seam press the other way, so we can easily interlock those seams. And so those points line up nice and pretty on that end. So once we have all that sewn together, this is our finished block. Super simple. And like I said, it's one of my favorite blocks. This would look really cool as a much bigger block. So this is a 6.5 inch block using 2.5 inch smaller squares. So this is one of the smallest versions of this block you can make using the lazy angle. So remember, with the lazy angle ruler, we can cut 1.5 inch pieces, 2.5, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 6.5 inch pieces. So you can make a pretty nice size square or block with when cutting larger strips, dealing with much larger pieces. So this finished one is 6.5 inches as you see it. So just imagine each individual block being this size. So like this would be 6.5 and so on and so forth. So you can have a really nice size square. So if you're trying to make a large quilt, I wouldn't, unless you really like the look of this size, I wouldn't make a quilt using blocks this small. I would make them much bigger, especially dealing with a king or a queen size quilt, and you want to make it a little bit quicker. You could do much fewer blocks and just have them bigger. And they're going to look really cool connected with these smaller squares going each direction. Super, super cool block. This would be a really fun quilt all by itself, the way everything would connect. But that's for another video, another class. All right, that's it. So we're all done with block number 8. Gosh, this is block number 8. So we're almost done with the whole quilt, just about. So we're done with block 8. So remember to like the video with that nice thumbs up. Leave your comments in the comment section below, especially if you have any questions, so I can answer those questions and everybody is able to see them. Go to my blog, thelifewithcodyandpete.blogspot.com, which are the links in the description below, just like with all the other videos. And you can find the pattern to create all of these once you watch the video, which is uploaded once a week. And that's pretty much it. So we're almost done with the whole quilt. We've got the majority of our blocks done. We just have a few more to go. So stay tuned for next week's block. And as always, happy sewing.